and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together ooky, the Addams Family. Their house is a museum when people come to see them. They really are a scream, the Addams Family.
Neat. Sweet. Petite.
So get a witch's shawl on, a broomstick you can crawl on. We're gonna pay a call on the Addams Family.
And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape.
In pursuit of peace. Our vision is one of peace, security, and prosperity that will protect the safety of our people and enhance the security of our wonderful friends and allies. Security. Saves the security with security. To advance security, and our first priority is always the safety and security as the beginning of peace and security disaster in this region. Peaceful societies will become engulfed by violence, but the path to peace begins right here in common security. Will advance security. Above all, America seeks peace, not war, to regional security. Continue to enhance security, then peace in this world is possible, including peace between Israelis and Palestinians, for peace, and yearns for peace. These are the blessings of prosperity and peace.
Ubaida. I work as a content developer. We develop videos, infographics, and motion graphics to combat extremist content.
أنا محمد، أعمل قائدا لفريق التحليل الإعلامي. يقوم نظامنا بمراقبة 100 قناة تلفزيونية عالمية بلغات مختلفة وتحويلها إلى نص وتحليلها لتحديد المحتوى المتطرف. أنا عبد العزيز، أعمل أخصائي.
But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape.
Voice he shouted, "Fallen! Fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling for demons, and a haunt for every impure spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal."
Rubbish. Not a word you might associate with Rome, but the Eternal City is looking decidedly dirty nowadays as poor public services struggle to cope, symbolizing the decline and decay of the Italian capital. The mayor has reshuffled his administration, pledging to clean up Rome literally and metaphorically.
Over the last 2 years, Rome has suffered political turmoil, as with the rest of the westernized world. So much so that their public utilities, such as trash removal, have been severely impacted. You can see that in many of the residential neighborhoods, trash is literally overflowing onto the streets and has been called out as a public health crisis. What's interesting about this garbage crisis is what has ensued afterwards. First, the city of Rome is dealing with an infestation of 6 million rats. Just for comparison, the city of New York has an estimated 2 million rats. The problem is so bad that the mayor of Rome has suggested a highly unconventional strategy of removing the rats by deploying 500,000 cats into the city. When we read the Old Testament of unclean beasts, mice and rats are categorized as crawling things that are as unclean as swine or boar. Speaking about swine and boar, those have entered the city en masse as well. On May 17th, it was reported that a wild boar attacked and killed a man in the city of Rome. The Bible speaks of swine or boar as the most unclean and most abhorred of all animals. You can see this video capture of a Roman citizen following a wild boar as it runs through the streets of Rome, very close to the Vatican. And the problem does not stop at rats and boars. The city is also experiencing an influx of seagulls, mice, and snakes, all of which are unclean animals in the Old Testament. Mr. Tonelli, a local Roman blogger, says social media is full of videos of these animals, and yes, I have seen many of these videos that they're publishing, which are seen by Romans as a symbol of the city losing control and of nature, a dangerous nature which thrives on decay, retaking Rome. Going back to Revelation 18:2, it is very plainly saying that Mystery Babylon, otherwise known as the harlot church of the Vatican sitting in Rome, will eventually fall and decay into ruin, being overtaken by all sorts of unclean animals. And this is exactly what we are starting to see manifest. Babylon has not yet truly fallen, but we are seeing the end times pieces fall steadily into place with the most recent advancements of the Pope and Donald Trump calling for a unification of religions for various purposes.
And that is why I am proud to make a major and historic announcement this morning and to share with you that my first foreign trip as President of the United States will be to Saudi Arabia, then Israel, and then to a place that my cardinals love very much, Rome.
And once all things have come to pass, the unclean animals of the city of Rome will have already multiplied and consumed that great city that sits on the 7 hills. Ever since the events of September 23rd, 2015, where these two beasts came together for a historic event in which Pope Francis spoke to a joint session of Congress, I have followed the relationship of these entities in detail. Therefore, when Donald Trump took office, I took the position that Donald Trump was not a Christian savior appointed by the Lord, but the new head of the beast of the earth.
But have you ever asked God for forgiveness?
I'm not sure I have. I just go and try and do a better job from there. I don't think so. If I do something wrong, I think I just try and make it right. I don't bring God into that picture. I don't. If I do something wrong, I think I just try and make it right. I don't bring God into that picture. I don't.
And so here we are on May 24th, 2017, where these two leaders have come together seeking common goals. That is, the unification of religions in the spirit of peace. Their meeting lasted less than an hour, and on its surface, there was some symbolism that I had anticipated. That is, Trump and his family would submit to Pope Francis. Sure enough, they did so as Melania, Ivanka, and their aide all wore black veils and black dresses, which is a common practice of submission or respect amongst formal female visitors to the Vatican. This is in stark contrast to the fact that none of these women, or any of the women in the Trump entourage, wore any head covering at all during their visit to Saudi Arabia. However, the symbolism goes much, much deeper than this, and it is in regards to the gift that Donald Trump presented to Pope Francis. So what is this gift and what prophetic significance does it have? One of the gifts that Donald Trump presented to Pope Francis was a bronze sculpture of the exact lotus species I was reading about 3 days earlier. Is it mere coincidence that of all the gifts that Donald Trump could present to Pope Francis, it would be one species of plant out of several thousands of species of plants, and that I, one who committed to his subscribers that this event would be prophetic and that I would be analyzing the symbolism, would have read about this very same species only 3 days earlier. So what is the important symbolism? The lotus is one of the most occult and ancient symbols of the natural world. And the fact that Donald Trump chose this sculpture, which was entitled Rising Above, is of grave concern. The lotus is the flower sacred to the Aryan Hindus, Egyptians, Buddhists, and more. References to it are found in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Jewish mystic religion of Kabbalism, and several other pagan religion texts and sculptures. For the occult, it represents the divine rebirth unto enlightenment, an abstract concept that is brought to life in the concrete or visible form of a lotus. It is, in essence, the same symbolism as the enlightenment of the all-seeing third eye. To name a few examples of its prevalence, you can see this in the occult film I, Pet Goat 2, where a lotus flower is seen blooming at the heels of then President Obama. His face grows stark as he witnesses the reality of this transformative stage of enlightenment. In Egypt, you can see here the 4 sons of Horus being birthed out of the lotus flower. In Buddhism, Buddha is frequently attributed to holding the lotus, and the list goes on and on. The reason why the occult reveres this flower and its symbolism of rebirth unto enlightenment is best described by Helena P. Blavatsky, who is the co-founder of the Theosophical Society, and she writes specifically on the lotus flower. For reference, the Theosophical Society shares ideology and partnership with the Lucis Trust, an organization that directly worships Lucifer and states that he is a misrepresented angel that sacrificed himself for the good of mankind. In her book, The Secret Doctrine, she references a passage from the Kabbalistic manuscripts, which states, pointing to like signification was the lotus growing in the waters of the Nile. Its mode of growth peculiarly fitted it as a symbol of reproductive activities. The flower of the lotus, which is the bearer of the seed for reproduction, as the result of its maturing, is connected by its placenta-like attachment with Mother Earth, or the womb of Isis, through the water of the womb, that is, the river Nile, by means of the long cord-like stalk, the umbilicus. Nothing can be plainer than the symbol, and to make it perfect in its intended signification, a child is sometimes represented as seated in or issuing from the flower. So you can now see how the occult viewed the flower as a symbol of rebirth as a child, or this rebirth into enlightenment, represented by a child coming out of the flower head. The Kabbalistic manuscript continues with the sexual and reproductive symbolism of the lotus. It states the locality of the womb is to be taken as the most holy place, the sanctum sanctorum, and the veritable temple of the living God. This falls in line with all occult practices as they practice sex magic and literally worship the female body. She also makes note of the lotus from the ancient Egyptian ritual Book of the Dead, which has a section entitled Transformation into the Lotus. It states, a head emerging from this flower, the god exclaims, "I am the pure lotus, emerging from the luminous one. I carry the message of Horus. I am the pure lotus which comes from the solar fields." So, I believe that the Antichrist spirit was definitely at work in this meeting. Any multitude of gifts could have been given to Pope Francis. Books, medallions, sentimental items, other pieces of art, etc. But out of these multitudes, Donald Trump chose the lotus. As the Egyptian Book of the Dead states, is Donald affirming that he carries the message or gift of Horus, an enlightened message essentially from Lucifer. Amongst the physical wars, rumors of wars, and visible evil of this world, there is a hidden or occult spiritual war occurring, and only those who have eyes to see and ears to hear can discern it. Brothers and sisters in Christ from around the world have been prophesying that we are indeed in the end times, and it's hard not to notice.
Now concerning the times and the seasons, brothers, you have no need to have anything written to you, for you yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying there is peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them, as labor pains come upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. So there will come a time sometime soon where our leaders and nations will be calling for peace and safety, calling for a unity, calling to come together in a new world order. Well, then sudden destruction will come upon us.
Between the Israelis and Palestinians, the President and Mr. President, you signed your name to the first Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement. You remember that well, right? And I want to support you in being the Palestinian leader who signs his name to the final and most important peace agreement.
To the final and most important peace agreement.
Mr. President, is truly historic. Never before has the first foreign trip of a President of the United States included a visit to Israel. Your first trip to our region proved to be a historic milestone on the path towards reconciliation and peace. I look forward to working with you in the years ahead, Mr. President, to advance security, prosperity, and peace. Mr. President, Israel also shares the commitment to peace that you expressed yesterday. We've already made peace with Egypt and with Jordan, and Israel's hand is extended to peace, in peace, to all our neighbors, including the Palestinians. The peace we seek is a genuine and durable one, in which the Jewish state is recognized. Security remains in Israel's hands, and the conflict ends once and for all. Mr. President, for 69 years, Israel has been doing precisely that. We've manned the front lines of civilization. We've fought terrorism. And we've built a modern, vibrant, democratic Jewish state. In doing so, Mr. President, we've protected all faiths, Muslims, Christians, everyone. Throughout the Middle East, Christian communities are decimated, minorities persecuted. But here in Israel, we're proud to have a growing and thriving Christian community, and we guarantee the rights of all. May God bless you, Mr. President. May God bless Israel, and may God bless the United States of
יש לי
America.
הכבוד להזמין את אורחנו המכובד, נשיא ארצות הברית, דונלד ג'יי טראמפ. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America.
We have before us a rare opportunity to bring security and stability and peace to this region and to its people, defeating terrorism and creating a future of harmony, prosperity, and peace.
Trump spoke as presidents before him spoke. And in so doing, he profaned and even blasphemed the true and the living God by implying that Muslims, Jews, and Christians worship the same God. Trump's speech is wrong on every level, and it's very grievous. And what's even more grievous is that if this weren't bad enough, most Christians have no clue. It's for this reason that many biblically illiterate Christians see Trump's trip as a good thing. He's going to bring peace, finally, to the Middle East. Here's the fact of the matter. He is seeking to unite Islam, Judaism, and Christianity vis-a-vis the dividing of Jerusalem. That's why he's in Saudi Arabia. He leaves for Israel. And then after Israel, he goes to Brussels, or he goes to the Vatican to meet with the Pope. And then after that, he goes to Brussels, where he'll meet with NATO. I'm hoping you'll bear with me as I, try to sort through what is arguably the most historic and prophetic series of events in recent memory. It's quite stunning. To say that this presidential itinerary is as strategic as it is historic and prophetic would be a gross understatement. And I say that by virtue of the underlying agenda of a one-world religion.
is all your affliction momentary. Not only is all your affliction light in comparison to eternity and the glory there, but all of it is totally meaningful. Every millisecond of your pain from the fallen nature or fallen man, every millisecond of your misery in the path of obedience is producing a peculiar glory you will get because of that. I don't care if it was cancer or criticism. I don't care if it was slander or sickness. It wasn't meaningless. It's doing something. It's not meaningless. Of course you can't see what it's doing. Don't look to what is seen. When your mom dies, when your kid dies, when you got cancer at 40, when a car careens into the sidewalk and takes her out, don't say, it's meaningless. It's not. It's working for you an eternal weight of glory. Therefore, do not lose heart, but take these truths and day by day focus on them. Preach them to yourself every morning. Get alone with God and preach His word into your mind until your heart sings with confidence that you are new and cared for.
Oh, you slay me, yet I will praise you. Though you take from me, I will bless your name. Though you ruin me, still I will worship. Sing a song to the one who's all I need. I'll sing a song to the one who's all I need.
It's going to be, according to some lead scientists, from NASA, it's going to be the most observed, most filmed, most photographed, most studied, most documented, and probably the most appreciated of all eclipses in all human history. So yeah, just go about your business. Don't bother paying any attention to this. It's not anything special, is it? Or is it? No, this is going to be a special solar eclipse, and here's why. By all means, this is something that you want to take note of. Now we know that a solar eclipse happens somewhere on Earth, every 18 months or so. Except for partial solar eclipses, they're more common. On average, about 2 to 5, they say, solar eclipses of some type occur every year. But total solar eclipses are special, and not just because they happen infrequently. A total solar eclipse is widely regarded as probably one of the most breathtaking, amazing phenomena that you can observe from this planet Earth with your own 2 eyes. And the August 21st event of 2017, it will also bring a strange and brief false night to the landscape on the path of totality. Now, here's what makes this really, really interesting, and how it fits in, I believe, how it sort of ties in together or has some relevance to the Revelation 12 sign in the heavens on September 23rd of 2017, because this is, you got to remember, this is just right before the sign. This is in August. This is August 21st. This total eclipse takes place. We're looking at just a little over a month, 33 days. 33 days, I believe. So it's almost like a 33-day warning leading up to the sign. So here you are, all of a sudden, you know, you see a 360-degree sunset all around you, stars appear, you know, the temperature drops, you can actually hear the chirping of grasshoppers, and, you know, because animals that naturally kind of go back to their nocturnal behavior, and then it kind of passes over and everybody goes, oh, wow, that was cool, and then they go back to work and they forget about it. Well, I don't know if people should so easily forget about this one, because many people will be able, you know, to experience this on the 21st if they actually choose to do so. About they say about 220 million folks live within a day's drive of the totality path, you know, that 70-mile wide path that extends from coast, you know, to basically coast to coast, from the coast of Oregon through Idaho, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. The totality will be, you know, everywhere along the path. Now listen close. There's an expert, an eclipse expert. His name's Jay Pasachoff. He's an astronomer at Williams College in Massachusetts. And he told Space.com last year, he said, this is what he said. He said it's been 99 years, 99, since a total solar eclipse was so accessible to Americans from coast to coast. And in addition, this August 21st event will be the first ever solar eclipse whose path of totality hits no country other than the United States. And get this, the last one to meet this geographical standard occurred before the nation gained its independence in 1776. So, yeah, let's just go back to sleep. Nothing happening here. Yeah, are you kidding me? 33 days before the sign of Revelation 12, the most amazing solar eclipse occurs over the United States, splitting the country in half. 99 years since a total solar eclipse like this was so accessible to Americans from coast to coast. And it will be the first ever solar eclipse whose path of totality hits no country other than the United States. And the last one to meet this geographical standard occurred before the nation gained its independence in 1776. This is a sign to the nations. It is particularly a sign to the United States, and it's 33 days before the sign appears in the heavens that fulfills Revelation 12 on September 23rd, 2017. Thanks for watching.
For many years, youth culture creation has been the forerunner in Western civilization engineering. The younger generation of any given time represents the influential group of the future. Therefore, these generations of youth, in order to ensure civilization follows the intended direction, must be and always have been conditioned and inculcated via culture, mainly pop culture, education, media-birthed fanfare, and food for identity. The idea of finding oneself, for example, is many times accomplished through pop culture. Media and establishment-generated culture. A concept we call culture creation, administered by examples like the entertainment industry via secret intelligence, with its roots and foundation in weaponized anthropology. Brought to us by examples like Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson, with its roots in further back ideologues like Wilhelm Reich, Charles Darwin, and social Darwinism, to Gnosticism and alchemy, and well, you can see the development of it all over time. From Nimrod to Simon Magus, John Dee, Sabati Zevi, Darwin, Crowley, Freud, Bernays, Huxley, Kinsey, to modern wizards like Moonves or Robert W. Pittman. We'll get to Pittman in a moment, but from Gnostic alchemy and Kabbalah to secular humanism and behaviorist scientism to, well, modern cable television. All these ideas and doctrines consolidated into a culture that fits perfectly into a little box for humans to sit in front of and learn from for hours a day. Youth culture creation via the television and mass media got its official start in the 50s, of course following its predecessor, the radio. The technology of using radio waves to carry information or sound modulated properties of electromagnetic energy through space, or as occultist Thomas Edison coined it, etheric force. Radio, as most if not all forms of technology, was first perfected within the military for alleged communication during World War I. Though it appears, and more importantly, radio was to be developed into a home appliance, a new opportunity to tap millions at once, the first social program of the state. Radio broadcasting, casting spells and creating culture, shaping perspective, or forming reality in all living rooms across the nation. Similar to how the television would follow suit, and then the personal computer, and now the handheld mobile smartphone. One of the first uses of radio was social engineering from the beginning. With Franklin D. Roosevelt, radio was used to sell FDR's new socialist regime called the New Deal of the 30s. At once, millions were reached with one message: mass acceptance and a joyous reception via the newness of American technology. And the relaxed state of comfort in one's own home, huddled up with family members, enthralled by the voice peering from a box. The New Deal was a welfare state prelude program that was sold to America single-handedly by the radio broadcasting system. A great source for a look at radio propaganda of this time is the book Psychology of Radio by Cantrell and Alport. Cantrell quotes, "By its very nature, radio was a powerful agent of democracy because it penetrated all levels of social, political, and economic barriers. Radio has the potential to be the biggest factor in shaping social solidarity." Well, today we would call this social engineering or state-designed mind control, and this is exactly what it was from the beginning. But of course, and as always, it is disguised in the veil of entertainment. For example, the black community targeting show Amos and Andy was utilized specifically to run systematic FDR New Deal propaganda spots throughout each airing. And we all understand this was a blackface type of show for the black community, yet they were actually white men playing the roles, playing the characters. This ensured black support and offered the population a false sense of security, identity, and importance. Early on in the 20s, under National Broadcasting Corporation, or NBC, and of course Columbia Broadcasting System, or CBS, programmers and government bodies began to realize that radio had the power to control the actions of man, and would gain the trust of the audience that was listening. Immediately, radio programming utilized Bernaysian techniques and aired agents of influence as alleged experts to influence the audience by appealing to authority. Here, radio personalities were created and became not only agents of influence, but trusted sources of information that millions would grow to depend on for their perception of what is happening in the world around them. "Dialogue could save the world," said Lewis Hill in 1942, ACLU member and leftist propaganda artist, Also founder of the pioneering progressive radio station KPFA in Pacifica, California. In 1951, KPFA receives the first major grant for the support of a non-commercial broadcast operation by, of course, the Ford Foundation. KPFA would go on to be a widely respected and trusted so-called independent radio source. Yet from its start, it has been a controlled opposition propaganda outlet funded by major establishment foundations, mainly Ford and Carnegie as well. Why KPFA? Why Pacifica? Well, this was the early 1950s, less than 20 miles from San Francisco. And what better way to prime a mass group for a new left counterculture movement that is only a decade away? Radio broadcasting. Who do you think sold the world the Grateful Dead, the hippie and New Age movements, the anti-war socialist brigades, the degenerate beat generation, free love and secular humanism? None other than KPFA. Well, let's just say they were at the front lines of these movements. The counterculture and the new left had a permanent home at KPFA, and still do. A Herculean bullhorn to shout their rhetoric and mantras to the masses. And yes, Ford Foundation, with the assistance of the OSS, CIA, would go on to fund other social operations like PBS, Public Broadcasting Service, the RAND Corporation, the Aspen Institute, and as well, Bilderberg. Ford also funded Margaret Mead's work and the development of Tavistock Institute. We will show why these two projects are so important later. But for now, we will focus on the radio. Oh, and let us not forget the beloved and alleged independent radio station NPR, National Public Radio. Yeah, Ford funded as well. Radio would be used to not only shape public perspective, identity, and political theory, but to create mass gatherings and revolutionary protest, similar to how its offspring, the internet, namely social media, is producing the same things today, and being used for the same ends and agendas. Then, just like the internet today, radio transformed a generation practically overnight. From audio waves to mass public action. But how did they know how to do this? They used music, certain bands and their attitudes, movies and advertisements, the cult of personality, and the manipulation of sound waves to literally transform society. How did they know how to use radio to accomplish all of this? Well, aside from the Kabbalist, occult, or spiritual aspects of radio that we find in Thomas Edison, we find the scientific answer for this in 1939 at the Princeton University, under the auspices of figures like Hadley Cantrell, Paul Lazarsfeld, and John Marshall. And of course, Frankfurt School elite and OSS agent himself, Theodore Adorno. The Princeton Research Radio Project set the stage for sound and media social engineering. The Princeton Research Radio Project studied the social psychological effects of messages in radio and its mass programming capabilities, or potential, especially the 1938 War of the Worlds Halloween airing, where Orson Welles aired a false flag type of story over the radio, sold as being real, but in fact it was a fake story. This would be a very early example of your first fake news. And it was done on purpose and studied at Princeton to see how a crowd reacts to dangerous or alarming information. Though the Princeton Radio Project had hundreds of sub-projects, it presented the foundation for all similar studies to follow, like the monumental Macy's conferences of the 50s, for example, where cybernetics was started, and especially all the MK Ultra projects. Princeton stood as a key starting point. Adorno and scientists wanted to know how human behavior correlates with music, the audio control of human emotions to find effective crowd control techniques. Audio that would or could induce mass hysteria, and overall, the creation of manageable subcultures via music and sound. Melodic and rhythmic organization. Establishing radio and television as a meta-analysis of mass subjectivity. The Princeton Radio Project also studied the dynamics of music, sound, and light, and the electronic development of bioenergetic psychoacoustics, coined by Jack Lacan. These studies would later bring us light shows and sound shows we saw in the psychedelic era, in raves and music festivals, and in clubs and casinos. The radio to television, the psychedelic to discotheques and rave electronica, decade to decade. All these eras find their psychobiological and technological foundations in the Rockefeller family-funded Princeton Research Radio Project of 1939. And several years after this project, it is no surprise that radio broadcasting services began to encapsulate America like never before, much stronger than its infantile days during FDR and the New Deal, and much more effective by now, utilizing music and the culture that came with it to shape the society that consumes it. With the 50s in full swing, so was the growth in production and use of the television. At this time, NBC, ABC, and CBS all were transitioning their primetime radio programming to the new medium, and it is here where monumental culture change began to take place. Though television was marked to change culture, it would also create subcultures and cultural dialectics between them. Probably the most vital subculture created during this time was the media creation of the teenager. A new target population and control group to shape, indoctrinate, and sell a new identity. This was accomplished nearly single-handedly through Hollywood celebritism, and namely James Dean or Elvis.
It's shocking. I watched him gyrate his legs and swivel his hips. And our parent-teachers group feels he should not be on television.
And the new teen film propaganda campaign that was unleashed on the American public via cinema and television, and of course, music. And to add to identity, things like blue jeans and the automobile were included to round out the parameters of this new, hip, and rebellious youth, or better, teen culture. Not only could they sell this group products, but moreover they could sell them ideas, a lifestyle, and in result manufacture identity, and change a generation and the future forever. This new rebellious teen culture would pave the way for the beatniks and hipsters, or the counterculture of the 60s, and the new wave culture clubs of the 80s. During the infancy of television programming, Hollywood celebritism, and major media networks in general, the 1950s was an era where science, alchemy, and global government proponents were not only entertaining Americans, they were actually structuring state-of-the-art mind control behind the scenes. The Macy conferences officially brought physical scientists and behaviorists and psychiatrists together at the same table to study the dynamics between human behavior and machines, and the effects of technology on the humankind. Moreover, what types of technology and which types of techniques would be required to predict, explain, and control the behavior of humans. It is no coincidence that immediately as these conferences ended, music industries, Hollywood productions, and television programming blossomed nationwide. At this time, Stanford Research Institute was building Disneyland in Anaheim. Hugh Hefner was debuting Playboy magazine, and Alan Dulles was beginning the MK Ultra projects. And of course, Frankfurt School's Theodor Adorno just published his authoritarian personality piece, formulated and released on the UC Berkeley campus, which of course spread like wildfire across all universities. National mind control was now at its peak growth period. Media, science, technology, education, all angles were being covered, with Ford, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Mellon foundations fronting the bill, while the OSS, CIA, American Jewish Committee, CFR, amongst many other think tanks, put all the pieces in their proper places. But in order for Adorno and Horkheimer of the Frankfurt School to bring in their new age left, or Margaret Mead and her Wilhelm Reich-inspired license to be a pervert, or free love culture fantasy to become a reality, American culture had to be destabilized. Christianity moral codes had to be severely undermined. And by 1950, this was officially kick-started by the media-manufactured teenager subculture. In 1944, the manufacturing began, with always the media conditioning propaganda of Skull and Bones publication, the Time Life magazine franchise. The hit story on the new rave of American teen girl life took center stage, opening the door for 17 magazine that same year. And the new concept of the teeny bopper, youth consumer culture, rebellious film and music. Serial dating and premarital sex in automobiles. Time, Life magazines, amongst other mainstream publications, have always played major roles in the formation of culture, specifically the directing of culture and engineering of subcultures. Of course, the bebop and swinger scenes catapulted this new teen craze, the hypnotic dance and trends of dress, the identifying music and intimate lyrical content, and romantic song concepts, leather jackets and tucked cigarettes in t-shirt sleeves, saddle shoes and bobby socks, poodle skirts and jukeboxes. All these things were not only fresh and exciting, even attractive, but in many ways were commonly forbidden. But through the allegiance of radio, television, and music, the state and its trained social engineers were determined to normalize these new and provocative concepts. Now, I know, to us today these concepts appear rather innocent, yet it's important to understand they were mere entry-level ideals, set to be tweaked and polluted over the decades to come. See, this had to be done in increments, perverted over time, to eventually bring in the new dark age, the postmodern techno-cult and Aeon of Horus. New Babylonia. So to begin this complex process, radio had to be perfected in the Princeton radio projects. Society and its in-group behaviors had to be understood, predictable, manageable, to ultimately structure the post-World War II social hive mind. Once the state earned the trust and control via radio broadcasting of the public, the culture had to then be disjointed and splintered into subgroups, mainly parent versus child. This was accomplished through the creation of the teen, and with the addition of television, Hollywood, and a new booming music industry to radio, the generation gap and American culture war began, posing a formidable threat to its Christian moral fabric and social stability as an independent nation.
It's just a matter of putting first things first. If God is in charge of the universe, then doesn't it logically follow that we are responsible to Him? And therefore, isn't it up to us to seek His will for our lives? To find out why we are really here on this earth? To discover how God wants us to use our talents, our abilities, and our energies? With all of the challenges facing us, isn't this the first and the greatest? To find ourselves and our destinies in God's plan.
And obviously all the thoughts and attention today, or the last few hours anyway, have been in Manchester with the, I guess you can call it the Ariana Grande massacre. I don't know if that's a fair title for what went down, but the reports are that 19 people were killed, an explosion took place, and several others injured. In fact, actually the number I'm seeing at this moment as I record this is up to 22. That'd be interesting to see if that's the final number, 22. 22 people dying on May 22nd. That's very bizarre. Or not, you know. That's what these folks do with their numerology and all that. And it's becoming pretty blatant, I think, with some of this stuff. And these are real lives. If these deaths actually took place, and it appears, I think when you're doing something like this in public and it's that big, lives are taken. Ariana Grande herself is 23 years old, and she comes out on the 23rd and said, "From the bottom of my heart, I am so sorry. I don't have words." And, you know, people will throw the arrow at Ariana Grande as being part of the system. And certainly, I think she has bought in. At the same time, I don't think she's behind this sort of event. You know, I think there are much deeper powers that are at play here. So, you know, although there will be, you know, symbolic things, I think in the music, you can probably find stuff. People have already discussed it and thrown out possibilities. The important thing is that real lives are being lost here. And that this thing, this New World Order thing is real and it's serious. You know, as much as we have been tired of talking about it, you know, in terms of, oh, let's expose the next conspiracy. Let's expose the next, you know, secret. Or people make fun of it. You know, it's like, oh, you're just talking about crazy conspiracy theories. New World Order, that doesn't exist. Well, at this point, it's hard to deny that something exists that is nefarious and doesn't have our best interests. And that it is not just one religion or one ideology, but a deeper spiritual reality. These types of events that I think the research community in the New World Order have been seeing for a very long time. We've looked at this, and I say we because I feel that I'm part of a greater group of people who have done this research and have promoted this research. And we have seen, and they have seen, the researchers have seen, that these types of events are not only planned, but they are systematic. They have numerological significance to these folks that do it, whether it's to conjure some sort of supernatural power out of it. Usually when there is actual sacrifice, that's the case. Something more nefarious is going on. And it's the same spiritual source that was behind 9/11, that's behind all wars. It's the same spiritual system. Yet it's now showing itself again in these events, and more attention is on it because we live in this time now where things are getting exposed, on the daily at a massive rate. And, it's kind of hard to deny this system is in place. Now, the problem now is that the system that's pointing out this entire thing that's emerging is also part of it, and so that's why we have to use our discernment in terms of news agencies and sources and things like that. A lot of it is a reality show, bringing up lots of dramatic things that don't really matter in the bigger scope of things, the personal drama, the personal interest stories, things like that are important. I do think we shouldn't ignore everything. Obviously, the Seth Rich story this last week is certainly something to keep an eye on and help folks whatever they need in terms of having the truth come out about that, because that seems to be another thread, right, that is loose that we can tug on. And as far as the DNC and Hillary Clinton and the Podesta and the Pizzagate and all that, that thing is still unraveling. But it's just a tentacle. That's the problem with the whole thing, with exposing just that. Yes, this is a very important part of the whole New World Order system. But I think part of the multiple tentacles of the octopus and what it's able to do is, the jig is up on this one. Here you go. This is all that's happening. This is all the realities, and it's ugly. At the same time, he has other tentacles. While everybody's paying attention to the exposure that's happening there, other tentacles are going into other areas and establishing itself in other ways. So that's what this whole octopus multi-headed system represents. And when it touches real lives, especially young people, that's part of this other narrative that's more disgusting about this, is that there is this disregard for all human life, including children and young people. And we know this ideology exists, through the exposure of things like Pizzagate and Pedogate. But you can start to see how it's the same spiritual system, but it's got us all upside down. A lot of us sit here and blame radical Islamic terrorism. We gobble up that narrative. Question mark, what's that? Islam, religion of peace, really? But to me, that is exactly what the enemy wants you to buy into, that narrative, because it comes off as undermining an entire people group when that's not what the point is, right? Really, the deeper point here, I think, is that beyond the religion, there is a deeper problem, a deeper spiritual problem. There's a puppeteer behind the puppet, Islam being another puppet to this grander system. Just in the same way, other monotheistic faiths, including Christianity, have been used to push forward the beast system. And certainly, as many would argue, Rome has been part of the beast system for a very long time, and that has been the head, quote unquote, of the church on this world. So certainly other religious systems can be used as a puppet to the puppeteer, which is the beast. And of course, more death. Chris Cornell of Soundgarden passes away at age 52. It's called a suicide. His wife has come out and expressed her suspicions about his death and who might actually be behind it. And there are some interesting parallels between Chris Cornell and Prince, as according to the research of some, both of their last performances were at the Fox Theater. Now, I actually looked into this. The last performance by Chris Cornell was at a Fox Theater, but it was in Detroit, whereas the performance by Prince was in Atlanta. It was also a Fox Theater, though. So that's really interesting. And of course, speaking of Fox, the chief of Fox News, Roger Ailes, passed away last week at the age of 77. Chris Cornell was 52, which is another 7. That makes 3 7s there for those numerological folks. It almost feels like the enemy is starting to mock God and his church at a level where it's so blatant to those of us who see what's going on that, we should really be in prayer, be ready and alert, awake, stay vigilant, stay in the Word, those types of things that bear good fruit in the world to fight this system. That's really the whole point here, is in order to fight it, a systematic teardown is not what's going to solve the issue. The beast, octopus, will reveal itself in other ways, even if a system goes down. So rather than fight it in that way, we ought to just simply produce better fruit and spread that good fruit around and share the gospel, the good news, and that combats the system. So that's why the thing with, not having the church aware of what's going on one level, I think is okay, because as long as you are doing the things that produce that good fruit, the fruit of the Spirit, right, then you are doing good. Kind of like Basil out there, doing missions trip. I won't say where, but certainly it takes a particular heart to do that. But I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between the head and the heart when it comes to many people in the church that feel a heart for missionaries and just an evangelistic heart in general, where they don't fully understand the systems of the world, and so their heart and the evangelism doesn't really translate or doesn't resonate as well as it could if they have that sort of head knowledge of how this world operates in terms of the beast system, the New World Order, and all of that. You're able to traverse and share the gospel in a unique way, I think, given the context and given the undergirding understanding of some of those issues. So I see both sides of it. But in any case, that was a little sidetrack, and that's what tends to happen here when Basil is not here in the conversation. When you do a show that's usually supposed to be a conversation and all of a sudden you do it solo, there are certain things that happen where you kind of trail off into random thoughts. But, the Chris Cornell thing, just to wrap that up, the whole thing with the musicians, the 90s grunge rock thing, all these movements are really suspicious. And, when a good friend of mine, Sam, over at God's Property Media, when he visited, he was talking about some of the symbolism that was coming out of the San Diego music scene. I guess it was kind of a punk rock scene. I don't know if it was exactly that, but definitely bands like Blink-182 were at the forefront of this. And we know Blink-182's association with Freemasonry, Angels and Airwaves, was pretty blatant in its symbology that it was Freemasonic. Tom DeLonge's, current endeavor to expose or reveal the extraterrestrial thing, he's got a personal mission there. So those are familiar territories in terms of a New World Order, dark system, hidden system. And the same thing you can say with Seattle, the whole Seattle music scene, right? Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, obviously Nirvana and Kurt Cobain being the first quote-unquote suicide there. And now Chris Cornell. You also had Alice in Chains and Lane Staley, who passed away just a couple years ago, I think. I think that was a drug situation. But yeah, I think these artists, right, these folks are definitely tormented by demonic entities. I think they are hoisted upon them by, the quote-unquote magicians behind the scenes manipulating, mass media. And I think they do use artists like this to further a darker spiritual agenda. It's the same agenda we've been talking about this entire episode. And these folks are victims of that. And, it's a sad thing, because that's what you see with the whole drug, sex, and rock and roll ideology. In fact, even in the 60s, if you look back, you'll find that that whole movement of, peace and all that was, in fact, a CIA operation. And the whole idea of using LSD to control mass populations, that's not a hidden thing either. That's been declassified. It really is, again, it comes back to fruit. You can see the fruit of the spirit of these movements, and it's never good. It's always suicide. It's always drug addiction or other kinds of addiction. And these idols are celebrated. And I think that's part of the extraction of worship away from or apart from God. So that's all I have to say about that. I grew up a rock fan. I was definitely into a lot of the grunge bands. That was my wheelhouse in terms of my age group. I started playing guitar. I think the first stuff I learned was Nirvana and, Soundgarden, Black Hole Sun, Spoon Man, all that stuff was definitely part of my upbringing. So I understand the popularity of somebody like Chris Cornell and, what he did. His voice was definitely very unique, very excellent in terms of a rock kind of voice that's not hair metal, but that kind of range. But that's kind of getting technical with the rock vocals. But in any case, there it is. Chris Cornell dies at 52, and all the surrounding weird things about that. Moving on, I'm going to try to get off the death train there. It's pretty depressing with all that. But remember, Jesus gives us life, right? So we can always say that despite all this death, there is life in Jesus Christ. So, a good reminder as all these dark things continue to happen around us. And I want to talk about Antarctica. And I know we've discussed it several times in many episodes, but there has been a narrative that's being pushed quite a bit recently that ties into the whole climate change thing. And obviously that's the whole narrative overall, which is, climate change, the ice is melting. There's stories out about Australia and how part of their national monuments and stuff will be underwater soon because of this. The same kind of scare tactics that we've heard before. And perhaps this is actually happening because there is something melting down there, and it's not because of global warming, but it's because of something else. Maybe the hole to the hollow earth is opening back up, or maybe the creatures that are imprisoned have been released and now they're melting the ice as they come out. Who knows? Who knows what kind of crazy, wild stuff is going on. But regardless, the push here is for the resources of Antarctica, specifically fresh water and, all the fresh ice there. And countries like Australia and places like Dubai have talked about getting fresh water, moving icebergs from Antarctica and harvesting that water. And the question is why? And I think this is also part of the fourth industrial revolution, the UN 2030 agenda. It's all tied together. But specifically regarding fresh water, clean water, this is a big resource. And so it's a limited resource as well, which is why this whole thing is very interesting. And obviously, if you've looked into the hollow earth theory and you know about the lush vegetation and perhaps a preserved sort of Garden of Eden situation that exists under the earth somehow, if that's the case, then certainly there are other resources that can be pulled from that. The whole Admiral Byrd story, there's a lot there. Obviously, there's a lot there in the world of conspiracy and speculation. But in terms of headlines and news items, it is interesting that they are pushing for these types of resource grabs. And I've seen a lot of headlines that say Antarctica is getting greener due to climate change, scientists say. That's breakingnews.ie. Real clear science. Is Antarctica gaining or losing ice? New York Times reported miles of ice collapsing into the sea in Antarctica. Forbes.com, Antarctica is going green and not in a good way. Washington Post, thanks to global warming, Antarctica is starting to turn green. U.S. News and World Report, Antarctica may be experiencing an unstoppable disintegration, report says. The Guardian picked up on it as well. Climate change is turning Antarctica green, says researchers. And even CNN reported moss is turning Antarctica's icy landscape green. Ontario Now reported Antarctica turning green because of climate change. Time magazine, global warming is turning Antarctica green. Everybody's picking up on this. It's turning green because of global warming, which is kind of counterintuitive if you sort of think about it. All these climate change folks, they're like, pro-green stuff, And then at the same time, it's like, the horrible global warming and climate change is causing ice caps to melt and Antarctica is melting and it's creating greenery, I don't know. It's just kind of a weird thing there. And obviously it's the whole thing is controlled and it's a controlled narrative. There's lots of problems with the whole climate change thing. I won't get into the whole conspiracy and all that. But the greater point here is this high strangeness, the suspicion surrounding Antarctica. Moo.hu reported China has no mining in its immediate plans for Antarctica. Oops, did they reveal something going on in Antarctica? Oh, there's mining happening there? Of what kind? What are they mining for? And why are they bringing this up in the Antarctic ambitions at a treaty meeting, as Bristol Herald Courier reported? And again, all these nation states are positioning themselves for or against, or maybe partaking in some of the resource grabs, potentially clean water and other things. And who's controlling the outflow of those resources? That is a good question that I don't think we can necessarily answer at this time. And of course, Politico, today being May 23rd, congressional medals awarded to Byrd's Antarctic Expedition, May 23rd, 1930. So on this very day, they are honoring Admiral Byrd for his Antarctic mission. Very interesting. What is really going on there? I don't know, but I would tell you that there perhaps are going to be discoveries of ancient ruins of some kind, maybe more pyramids, maybe a sort of Atlantis situation where people will say that, oh, this is the lost city because they'll find pyramids and very similar architecture and symbolism as those found in Egypt and beyond. And perhaps this will confirm in the minds of many some kind of extraterrestrial presence in the ancient past, and maybe, you know, some sort of system to call them back. Who knows? Again, the narratives spin off into science fiction rather quickly here, but the point being that there is something strange going on, and the level of mainstream narratives that are being thrown out there now about, oh, we need to get resources, we need to, you know, it's turning green because of moss, but it's not moss, it's just green because of climate change, you know, that kind of stuff we should probably be very suspicious of, especially because, hey, why are they all of a sudden focusing all this attention about climate change on Antarctica, right? Maybe they're trying to prepare the masses for some sort of announcement, some kind of discovery. And I will say this, there was an interesting report, as part of the report, there's this thing called WebBot, which is done by a guy named Cliff Hyde. I know some of you guys probably are familiar with it. If not, this WebBot is basically this algorithm that curates internet content and makes predictions about the near future. And in terms of WebBot and Bitcoin, it's been pretty accurate, which is kind of trippy if you really think about it. When we're talking about an image and a mark of the beast and all that, the systems are being placed right in front of us, and it's pretty remarkable. It's not the mark or the, you know, worship of the image yet, but all the tools necessary for that to occur are being placed right in front of us at a world scale. But in any case, there was a recent WebBot report that stated that tithing in churches will dramatically decrease. And I don't know if it gave a reason or not. I didn't actually read this myself. This is a third party. This is something that a good friend told me, but I believe he read the reports, and that's really interesting. What would cause the churches to dramatically decrease in tithing? Well, an ancient discovery of some kind that really undermines the sort of modern understanding of Christianity in some way by introducing an extraterrestrial past of all religions, that can really undermine Christianity in general in terms of a public perspective. And the whole push for aliens and all that, that's been in the media forever. And then you have, you know, Antarctica being pushed, and a concern for climate change, the melting of the icebergs, all those narratives being pushed as well. It all seems to be leading to a convergence where all these aspects, these elements, even transhumanism as part of perhaps, hey, we discovered this ancient civilization, we found their ancient toys and machinery, and we have resurrected a very, very old form of technology which controls electromagnetic movements, and who knows. Again, every time I start talking about these things, it just sounds like an aspect of a science fiction story, which is what we live in, folks. This world is definitely stranger than science fiction. And, you know, part of that narrative is the resurrection of Christ, and that is supernatural, and it defies all that we know about natural physical law, and defies everything we see and experience as decay and death as part of this world. And so there's something to be said there. But again, I just wanted to keep tabs with this whole Antarctica thing because I do find it fascinating. And as parallel headlines to that, we have The Verge, why astronomers are scrambling to observe the weirdest star in the galaxy this weekend. That was this past weekend here. You know, that alien megastructure star, it's back in action. And basically, that whole concept of a Dyson sphere and the anomalies of deep space, the light patterns and stuff that we saw, well, apparently it's at it again. It says here, quote, as far as I can tell, every telescope that can look at it right now is looking at it right now. That's pretty remarkable if you think about it. You have a consensus of all the telescopes that can look that far out into deep space are doing so. That's very interesting. Now, I'm going to tie together a few other headlines here that seem to be not associated, but again, in the greater scheme of things, in looking at things eschatologically, I think they do have a connection point. But the first one I wanted to touch on as sort of a sidestep here from the alien megastructure is one that came out on the Science Alert. Headline, the world's best dark matter detector just delivered its first result, finding the universe's missing 85%. And this machine called the Xenon 1T is looking at data to try to detect dark matter. And I know some people who abide in the electric universe theory believe that it's not dark matter, that it's all electricity, which is very possible. And I think there's something to that. And, I'm not a full-blown electric universe guy, but I do think that there's some elements to it that seem to resonate true in terms of the nature or fabric of reality. The article here actually mentions CERN and the Large Hadron Collider as well, which has been known to try to detect dark matter as well. So everyone's in on looking for dark matter, which again can prove to cause a rip in the fabric of space-time rather than finding any kind of confirmation for the current standards of physics, which itself may change dramatically in the near future. Futurism.com just reported new research shows that a naked singularity could exist in physics. In brief, at a point of a black hole's singularity, the laws of physics cease to apply. Researchers running a simulation have created such a singularity outside of the confines of a black hole. So again, more and more confirmation that there are metaphysical realities to this world. And, they're basically admitting to supernaturalism without admitting that it's supernatural. So in any case, my point with all of this is that, reality is being rewritten, so to speak, even in the science labs when it comes to how things work, how things really are. And in the process of unhinging everybody's worldviews by rewriting it or adding to it, or, oh, this new discovery creates this, all the philosophy that is drawn from the conclusions made by science, in general, I think is going to be assisted by some sort of discovery, whether it comes from Egypt or Antarctica or whatever. And then that in turn will be another detriment to the church body and really will, I think, help fulfill the concept of a great apostasy, a falling away of the church, the following of doctrines of demons instead of the doctrines of wholesomeness.
Something interesting has happened, something I think is very interesting, and that's in relation to the federal prosecutor's dead body discovered in Florida Beach. Of course, this isn't really being covered by the mainstream media at all, even though it's extremely ominous. So what is it? So I reported yesterday about the district that this was reported, this death which happened yesterday of a federal prosecutor, which will now involve the FBI, took place on Hollywood Beach. So within the similar district, I think it's the exact same district as Debbie Wasserman Schultz, of course, controls, and she's a representative for that district within Washington. Why that's interesting, because this is the exact same district where the lawyers behind the DNC fraud lawsuit have actually filed their lawsuit, and also where there's a certain judge overseeing the lawsuit in the same district. So this is all allocated. Now, George Webb yesterday phoned up the actual lawyer of the DNC lawsuit, who sounded extremely panicky now that they had found this out. And it's best left to them to explain what the connections are. Of course, I don't know enough about it. I'm just reporting on things from the news cycle. But I just want to go and touch on the DNC lawsuit before we actually go into the actual video itself. So this is the DNC lawsuit as reported by Caitlin Johnston again here. This was on May the 14th. So a bit of information has come out about that. But around this DNC lawsuit right now is just a massive media blackout. No one's talking about it anywhere, which is extremely strange. And so the basic nutshell of the lawsuit is this. The DNC took large donations from everybody, Hillary supporters and Bernie supporters. But what they did is they rigged the election, as the WikiLeaks emails show, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz seen here, if you know, you've probably seen in the last video I did, where she was telling the police chief of the Capitol Police to give her back her laptop, even though it was part of evidence for a criminal investigation. If you haven't seen that video, it's just a few videos ago, but she's in charge of this same district where this federal prosecutor ended up murdered. The same district which has the judge overseeing the DNC lawsuit. Now, why would you assassinate someone? Let's speculate, and I don't know if these are all connected, this is just my speculations, but this is a huge deal because the DNC is extremely powerful. They're powerful in the way that they decide who goes into positions of power. Those people that are in these positions of power, they decide on wars. You know, they decide on, you know, whether oil futures are going to go up, whether Wall Street bets on oil futures, you know, how many weapons Lockheed Martin can expect to sell next year. And that is a major thing. They decide everything. You know, politicians that are in charge, they shape the, you know, the legal system, the laws within the United States, for example. So that's a very important control mechanism for agencies or outside influences. Not even maybe the CIA, maybe Mossad, maybe MI5, maybe intelligence sectors from within China, who knows, or even Russia. No one really knows. All they know is that it's a very kind of like a spider web of influence. So everyone's trying to influence everyone because they want to control what's at the top. How you do that is through blackmail operations. You take people with heavily stigmatic, let's say, sexual preferences, and you just groom them throughout the actual ladder system of the DNC or Republican Party, put them into positions of power by just funding their operations, you know, their campaigns. Once they get to the top, you control them through blackmail operations if those individuals aren't just straight up CIA themselves. My perspective is a lot of them are probably just career CIA, proud of some kind of project, whatever project it's called, but it's utterly corrupt, and you can tell it's corrupt to the core, and that's what this lawsuit's going to expose. That takes us back to the federal prosecutor where the lawsuit's actually taking place right now, and of course this very important phone call from George Webb. George Webb's behind the camera, and of course this individual's on this side. So let's take a look at this.
Okay, well, it's an interesting thing. You know, we had, apologies if I'm, speaking a little, if I go off on a tangent here.
Sure, that's fine.
And feel free to ask me questions. I'm actually a little more anxious than normal. I don't know if you heard about this federal prosecutor in Miami who was found
drowned
in the ocean in Hollywood Beach just the other day. So, I gotta tell you, I'm very, very anxious. I'm not jumping to any conclusions about, what happened to these people because I just know the facts that we know. I mean, with Sean Lucas, I don't know if you've had a chance to go through the docket on the JAMPAC website, but we filed.
So just want to point out that this is the lawyer that's in charge of the DNC lawsuit right now. And the person that filed it, Sean Lucas, is dead, died shortly after filing it. So this individual's standing there, and Jared Beck pretty much is talking about that. So this is the actual person involved in the DNC lawsuit. Let's go on.
An email that we got from the DC police that there was pardon me, it was like the death report in which it says that he was found on his bathroom floor by his girlfriend.
Yeah. His girl, yeah, I can't remember his girlfriend right out there, Savannah something, I can't remember her last name.
Okay, and then, so my wife, she's the one that actually hired the process server company in DC.
Okay.
I mean, we didn't know these guys. We just needed somebody to serve the complaint at the DNC, and so we hired, my wife, who, I'm sure would be happy to talk to you.
So I just want to go on from here, just go to the clip about the judge himself. Hold on one second. So here we are on the second part of the video. This video will be linked in the comment section. Of course, you can find it by the day and etc. on George Webb's channel. Let's have a look here, and they go on again, come back to the federal prosecutor's death and the judge.
Yeah, so he died after the judge said.
Yes.
Yeah, and so is he the prosecutor? He has no relation to this case, though. He's just very close.
No relation to this case, but he practices in the same district that this judge is in, and while he's from Miami, he was found dead in Broward County, which is the same judge, it's the same place where the judge lives.
Miami, that's nice.
Well, that's very close, though, isn't it? Broward County?
Yes.
Yeah, to the south.
Broward County is the first county north of Miami-Dade County.
But it's kind of like a dead fish at your door, right? You take the prosecutor and you drop him at the door of the judge and just say, hey, by the way, especially we're going to find that
sleeping with the fishes.
My wife's a big fan of The Godfather.
Yeah, it's just...
So that's pretty much it in a context there. The federal prosecutor was found in the same, the same area as the judge actually lives, dropping the dead fish, so to speak, on the doorstep of the judge who's overseen the DNC lawsuit. So you can imagine that there's probably this lawyer is pretty afraid. These people are like cartels, these drug cartels are very dangerous, extremely dangerous, and that's the way it is. Unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. So it looks like there's a relationship there in regards to the DNC lawsuit. Link to this video. Of course, you can find it on George Webb's channel. I'll put a link to this video in the comments section so you can all take a look at it and decide for yourselves, of course. Make up your own minds. Maybe there's a connection, maybe there's not a connection. Go out and do your own research and, of course, decide for yourselves. Time will only tell. We'll see if the DNC lawsuit goes anywhere and if anything else happens. But that's a powerful move, and it does tell us one bit of intel. And that's that the judge hasn't been swayed internally. They haven't been able to get to the judge internally, so now they're working out extreme measures of influence. If they have to use extreme measures of influence like this, it's most likely that the judge was fair to begin with, and he couldn't be swayed. Will this sway the judge? Well, this brings in the FBI. So we'll see if the FBI, what the FBI will do. After Comey, their image has been tarnished quite significantly, of course. And there's a lot of strange things happening at the FBI. So we'll see what happens. But the FBI does have new leadership, of course. Andrew McCabe, who's the new leader of the FBI, whose wife, by the way, has been linked to the Clinton establishment. So we'll see. We'll see what happens here. You know, it's very strange indeed when you have the FBI guarding you, and it's run by an individual who's got such strong links to the actual Clinton establishment. Donald Trump needs to appoint a real director of the FBI. They need someone right outside all of the establishment like this. And who knows, because literally Donald Trump's pick for the FBI director will be a make it or break it for Donald Trump.
It says that it makes no difference what you've been trusting in as your righteousness, all the good deeds that you've ever done. When you step back and you look at the righteousness of Jesus Christ, you say to yourself, this is nothing but a bunch of dead garbage. God, deliver me from anything I've ever done like that. In plain words, he purges your conscience of dead works. What is a dead work? A dead work is to do good for somebody, to think that that's going to earn you favor with God. That's a dead work. A dead work is when you go out and do something, even sacrifice or give something, and you think that it has created righteousness on your account. You're dead wrong. There is absolutely nothing, no matter how good you do. I don't care what good works you've done. They are dead works if they're not done with the power of the Holy Spirit of God. Now that counters some people, because people have taken money from their pocket and time from their life. They've given of themselves. They've gone here, gone there, done this, done that. And these are all honorable things. But when they are related to the salvation of your soul and the righteousness of Jesus Christ, they're dead. Dead as they can be. Absolutely meaningless in the sight of God. Not only that, but the Bible says in the book of John, chapter number 8 and verse number 34, here is another reason that you must be born again. John chapter number 8 and verse number 34. Some of you will say, no way, preacher, no way, not me, not me. But here's what it says. The Lord Jesus Christ said in John 8:34, verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin. He's a slave. He or she is a slave to the passions. There's something that rules your life. There is a hidden sin that literally possesses you 24/7. Or sometimes you keep it down. Sometimes you put it away. Sometimes you close it in a closet. But it nags at you and gnaws at you, and it'll come back out, and it'll haunt you, and it'll take hold of you, and it'll drag you right back down to where you were before, for you are powerless to overcome it without the blood of Christ. The only one that can overcome sin is the blood of the Lord Jesus. The only one that has the power to break the bonds of sin is the Son of the living God. He said, because I live, ye live. And if you're alive in him, you can be alive over sin, over death, and over hell. But you cannot break its power on your own. You may be able to get over one thing, but the devil will give you something else. You may be able to break one addiction or one habit or one problem, and then he'll load you so full of pride that nobody can stand to be around you. Satan has every nuance you can imagine of sin. Sin is not always some raw, filthy sin of the flesh. Sometimes it rises high. Sometimes it becomes holy looking. Sometimes it appears pious. And all along it is self-righteousness, which in the Word of God, self-righteousness is the worst of all the sins, based on pride, and it is rejection of the work of the Lord Jesus. We are sinners, and we need the salvation from sin, and we need to break the power of sin. Some of you have been in every church in Knoxville. You've been in and out every rehab clinic. You've had every shrink tell you everything. You've been analyzed. You've had everything done to you that they can do to you. And you're still the same you've always been. And you're in the same mess you've always been in. And you're still bound by sin. So I don't like to hear that, preacher. I believe every man's got a spark of divinity in him. All you got to do is fan it and do right, and God will just help you along, and you'll be okay. And God Almighty's my friend. And what are you preaching to me like that for, preacher? Because I'm telling you that you must be born again. And sin is a horrible master. If you don't believe what sin can do, just go to the emergency room at the hospital, the drunk tank, to the morgue, to the hospital wing, Go down here to the divorce courts, look at the crying babies, look at the dying people with cirrhosis of the liver, kidney failure and everything else, lung cancer and all that goes with it. And you'll find out what sin can do. Sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Sin does not finish and lead to death. Sin works in your members and will not stop until you're dead. Say it again. I got to say it now. Sin will work in your members and will not stop till you're lying stone cold dead. The only one that can break the power of sin is the Lord Jesus. There are people sitting in this house this morning, done everything God Almighty said not do, broken every commandment God ever wrote down in the 10 Commandments. People in this house today have some of the most checkered, godless backgrounds you can imagine. People sitting in this house today would be a shame and abomination for an upstanding person to even know it. I'm going to tell you something. They got saved. From the guttermost to the uttermost. Come unto me, he said, all ye that are heavy laden with sin and with its power and with its damnation and its corruption. It perverts the mind, it perverts the tongue, it perverts the heart, it perverts the life. It won't stop until you're dead. Sin, when it is finished, if you commit it, you're a slave to it. The Lord Jesus Christ said, he that committeth sin is the servant, slave, doulos of sin.